14th day of March.
Pi Day.
What was that?
It's Pi Day.
Yeah.
314.
Okay.
We should close early.
Right.
So, anyway, March 14th of 2023.
Mhm.
We appreciate your attendance with us, those who are here in person and those who are online with us. We'll begin our meeting tonight. I'd like to acknowledge Councilmember Galpaz, inviting Chris to start our meeting with either a thought of her and then leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. More involvement from the citizens, the better. So, Chris, we're going to go ahead and get started.
They said I could do both because I did find something that was really awesome. I heard it, so I had to tweak it because it doesn't look flow well, but anyways, it's short, so, and then we'll do a prayer as well. To advance the interests of ordinary people, we need more democracy, not less. Maximizing power in our communities leads to maximum individual freedom. To achieve this, we need some principles and or guidelines. My principles are derived from a faith in God. As such, my love of God requires good faith in dealings with other people. We really should all move beyond contempt of the opinions of other people that you're involved with. We should all be able to be open and engaged in conversation lovingly and openly. The reason we need to conduct ourselves in this way is that we really don't know what other people are dealing with in their lives and what they're suffering with or going through currently. There will be reasons that we don't know that they will shape their opinions, perspectives, and points of view. The country has seen a lot of binary thinking, which reduces our abilities to analyze various perspectives. So it is important that we remain open to one another, not to close our minds. Open conversations with a variety of people are something that drives us to understand each other without contention. The ability to engage in each other, with each other, in a civil manner, respecting everyone's opinion is paramount to maximizing power in our community and in turn individual freedoms. And then I'll lead the prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, please bless this meeting that we can have opinions heard and that everyone can understand each other and maximize those individual freedoms as we get together as a community and as a city to move forward with things that we so dearly love in our day-to-day lives. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. Council, you had a chance to look at the evening's agenda and reviewing that. Is there any concerns you have regarding a conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest that you'd like to disclose at this time? Okay, I don't see any. So the second item on our consent agenda is the acceptance of the municipal wastewater refining program, commonly known as the MWPP. This is an annual report, and Trent, did you want to enlighten us on that, or you just want to know if the council had any questions after reading that document?
Either way.
Okay. To say, okay, I was going to save you some grief and just ask the council if they had questions.
I really love talking to the people. So for this report, just to make sure we're in compliance with the state, what they want us to do, make sure we have any overflows, which we don't, knock on wood. We clean them up properly, we report them to the state. Make sure we have money for long-term projects, which I believe we do. Jamie fills that part out. As for the condition of our system, we're lucky we have a good system. We continue to do CIPP, period in place pipe, which goes in the concrete pipe and makes it plastic, and it prolongs the life of the pipe by lasts up to 100 years. It prevents inflow also, so no extra water going down our lines and out to the sewer plant to get treated.
Of course, you know that sewer plant, they don't reward you for cutting back on flow. I've decided, I'm working on it though, working on it.
Don't give up.
I'm not.
We're doing our part. I know they've told us they appreciate what we do.
Yes, and we appreciate what you do too. So let me ask the council if they have any questions. I know there's was some modifications to the original document. I think it was just correction of a few minor things.
Medical errors,
That's okay.
Errors and commas, I just one continuous sentence.
All right. So any concerns, any questions? If not, then you need a motion by the council, I believe, to approve that document. That was what was waiting, what they were waiting for was approval of the council.
Right.
So with that, do we have a motion to approve the annual report as submitted?
Mayor, I move that we approve the municipal wastewater planning program as presented by Trent.
We have a motion, we have a second. A second. Councilmember Severing, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Did such a fine job, Trent, that, just kind of went right through. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
All right, then we'll enter into our active agenda now. Seek public comments for anyone who would like to make a comment this evening. And John, if you would monitor our online participants. Have any public comments? See, you can state your name if you're a resident of North Ogden, and please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes.
Understood. Ben Olis, North Ogden City. So recently, I'll show you guys a picture here, and the Flock Security LPR license plate recognition system has been implemented here in North Ogden. And this, for anybody that's not aware, it collects data on all comings and goings to North Ogden City by vehicle type, vehicle color, license plate, of course, and unique vehicle alterations. So if there's any stickers on the car, if there's any bike racks, anything like that. I texted John and asked, what is it being used for? And he said that it's mostly being used for Amber Alerts. And then there's 2 people that only have access to it, and that's all. But I've got a couple questions. Was there any formal approval process with the city council prior to installation of the system? There was. Okay. Were there any ordinances put in place for privacy data, data retention? Because this is going into a cloud-based system that this company Flock Security will have, at least unless you've got a setup here specifically in North Ogden that is not connected to their system. All this data is being sent to Flock Security, and I'm curious to know if are we sharing this information to other cities nationwide, what assurances has the council put in regard of ordinances or any kind of guarantees to enforce safeguards?
So what would be your concern regarding privacy? Because Chief, you can double check me on this, but I don't think we have names of who owns the vehicle. It simply alerts us if it's a stolen vehicle or an Amber Alert or an outstanding warrant with that vehicle. We don't capture the names of who that vehicle is registered to, etc. Is that my recollection correct?
So the system does 2 things. It checks NCIC entry. So if it's a stolen vehicle, a fugitive, it's linked to an Amber Alert, the kidnapping suspect, or missing endangered person, then yes, it'll send us that information to say this vehicle is listed NCIC because of this.
Mhm.
And then we have to go pull that data, which we can do with any vehicle that
Enters the city.
that we see from the NCIC database. And then the second thing is it does collect an image of every car, stores it for 30 days on this cloud system. And we do not and cannot access that information unless we have a legitimate investigative purpose. So we actually have to enter case numbers and why we actually are searching for a blue SUV with a white sticker in the back window.
Yeah.
Because we just had a porch package theft at address, here in the city, and we got a good ring camera video of the vehicle pulling up, somebody jumping out, stealing a package. And we got this description of the car, we can enter it, and it will give us back any hits on the similar like vehicle. It's really very precise if we have good information.
Okay, and so when you query the system, are you doing it just by license plate number, or is like, hey, we have a case and you enter the case into the system and then any searches then done in regards to that case are tracked? Or you just put in a license plate number and
So if we have a license plate number, there's really no need for the system. We already have it identified.
Yeah.
As long as the license plate that we have belongs to the
sure,
vehicle.
yeah,
Right, so, but if it does not, or we don't have a license plate number, that's where a vehicle description is entered into the system and then takes back anything. We actually saw he did a demonstration for it, Flock did the rep. He put in about 5 criteria: white SUV, roof rack, spare tire carrier, and a sticker. And did it in a location, because this is a nationwide system.
right,
We're like the 400 and something municipality to actually install it. This was an intersection where there was millions of vehicles that had crossed through this intersection within the time frame, and it was just a couple of days time frame. And it actually used those 5 criteria, and it pulled one vehicle from the database that actually matched that. So it wasn't pulling dozens and dozens and dozens, but now we're running all this information. I mean, we have to get back and pretty precise.
I guess, Chief, the thing is, there are controls put in place with the system itself as we query at that point in time.
Mhm.
But I would advise, if you'd like to sit down with the chief and learn more about that. The council did query the chief quite a bit on that. We're concerned that it's properly used, so.
Okay.
If you'd like to sit down and give you some more information.
Well, thank you. All right.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Mayor, can I just pose a question here too? As my husband has worked in big data and knows what you can do with it. Does Flock own the data once they collect it? And then do we have safeguards about what they are able to do with it?
So there will be a contract. We
On a trial basis right now, right? Test basis.
and there will actually be a follow-up meeting with the council prior to that trial period ending. But the data is owned by us. It's stored by them.
Okay,
It's purged after 30 days.
okay,
And like I said, it's not even utilized unless we have a legitimate investigative purpose to utilize it.
okay. Yeah,
These
because it might be.
cameras are not mobile, they're not taking video. We can't move them, we can't view live feed. Which I was a concern that somebody else had brought up.
Okay,
But
thank you.
Anyone online, John? Any other questions here? Okay, thank you very much. Now move on to item number 4. Our presentation will be made by Mr. Scott Hess, who's our Community and Economic Development Director. And this is a discussion on a Title 8 public ways and properties for neighboring property owners.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is in response to a request by the council as part of my responsibility doing property management with the city and some of the work that we've been doing with property owners to consider how you might allow private property owners to improve public ground that is directly adjacent to them. So we looked at different places in the ordinances that this could go. Found that Title 8 public ways and properties is the closest nexus for that, and wrote this section 8-8 private landscaping on public property. The intent isn't to go through everything. We used another ordinance to model this, and John and I have done some red lines beyond what was in the packet. But the question tonight for the council to consider is, should we do this? That's one, write this ordinance, and then we'll bring you back up another form for actual adoption. So tonight's just a consideration. And then we have these two items, limitations and landscaping. So limitations would be what can a private property owner do on public ground, and what level of landscaping would they be permitted? So currently, as we've thought about this, the permit holder would not be allowed to install permanent structures to include fences or underground sprinkling systems, retaining walls, leaves or grass clippings, grain waste, do compacted gravel, concrete, or asphalt. We don't want these to turn into secondary or third parking areas, and may not regrade the property. City would encourage water-wise landscaping and would permit water-wise grasses, other low water use shrubs, ground cover, bark, mulch, decorative rock, and removable planter beds. That'd be things like above the ground planter beds that are put in could easily be pulled down and scraped off. We had a question about the underground sprinkling systems. John brought up a really good point that we don't own our secondary water system, and the secondary water system is based on a water shares utilization amount that's done at a subdivision level or a private property owner level that's bound to the property that individual property owner owns and pays a water fee for. So to extend, say you had a quarter acre and then you improved another quarter acre of ground, you'd be doubling your water utilization on that. And I don't think Pineview has a mechanism, or our other secondary water systems have a mechanism for collecting that. That wouldn't necessarily stop like aerial overspray if you took the 180-degree heads and turned them into 360-degree heads, and or a drip system. So if you had a spigot that was at the end of your property and then it was hooked up to an above the ground hose through some sort of dripper system that went out into a garden, say, or a planter bed or something like that, I think that's all things that could be permitted. But as far as just extending your turf grass, there's problems with that just because we don't collect the fee. I mean, it's not our responsibility to collect that fee, and Pineview wouldn't be collecting that fee for water utilized outside. Maybe there's a fee in lieu or an exchange on that if they didn't go over a certain amount of ground, but those are further complications. So with those basic elements, the rest of the ordinance is really kind of our process. So the application process, some definitions, when a permit would be required, who's the approver of these. It's planning department. With the mayor is the appeal authority. If we're to say no, essentially the planning director were to say no. And then this will be tied to the next item for your consideration, which is the leasing that John's going to talk about. So timeframes for this would be tied back to this permit and land leases essentially.
Okay, Scott, I guess the first question, council, would be, do we want to entertain allowing citizens who have adjoining property to enter into a lease with the city, which would be the next step, and under the conditions that Scott just outlined? I am just going to do a little straw poll here to see how we continue. And let's start this end. Councilmember Dalpaz, after reading and looking at this, are you interested in entertaining the use of city property in this manner?
Just initially, I'm not opposed to looking into it.
Okay, Councilmember Selling.
I feel the same way.
Okay. Councilmember Epstein.
As long as it's clear to the property owner that they're just being a good Samaritan to make something pretty for everybody. That's the thing that I worry about. Sometimes people tend to, it's like, well, I'm taking care of it, therefore it's kind of mine. And that just gives me pause. But yeah, I would love to have a discussion where we just kind of bat it around for a little bit.
Okay, you understand that clear is in the eye of the beholder, right?
That's that's my fear.
Councilmember Barker, would you like to proceed?
Yes.
All right, well, I don't know what to say, Councilmember Swanson, but your vote might be overruled by the other four.
No, I asked for this to be written, and it's, I'm all for it. I didn't see in this portion of it though, where we would be requiring a lease.
That's next.
That's
That's the next.
Right, right. I'm not in favor of necessarily requiring a lease and charging. If it's adjacent property and all they're doing is some simple beautification. I mean, it behooves, it's to the city's advantage that some of these properties look better and are cared for in a way that they're left open to the public. I don't think it needs to have a lease, so we can talk about that on the next one, but I'm all in favor of this.
I think the idea was to get some clarity that the property can be taken back, just to
Right,
document some. clarity.
maybe it's
So,
a $0 lease or something, or
Right, I don't
$1
think
lease or something simple,
to
yeah.
enrich the city by any means, so.
Okay.
What questions do you have? Then, Scott, you've had a chance to, I know John kind of tweaked a few things there. Mr. Call, would you like to add to, what Mr. Hess has explained there? Helping the council with additional information?
So I think that the things that Scott identified are good. There might be some times where mulch might not work, for example. And so we might want to add some language about the it being up to either public works director or the planning director on what's allowed. I think we want some sort of a very simple approval process, which is kind of the point of the next item, is to how can we make it as simple as possible. But other than that, it's really whatever the council sees as being allowed. I mean, if you want to allow underground water systems, we can ask Fine View if there's a way that we can accomplish that. It's just something we probably need to explore with them. So.
And the mulch and the parking, that, part of the problem with this is that we own 300 parcels over, 270 something acres. So some of these are right on sloped detention basins or creek basins. Those are areas you may not want anything that is, able to go down and create a flood debris issue. But other areas will be flat and it might not be problematic.
Councilmember Barber, do you have any
No,
more questions?
I agree. Nope.
Yeah. I mean, this does get a little, it sounds simple, but it's complicated because somebody's gonna have to be approving what can take place if it's close to, I mean, it is gonna be somewhat complicated.
And then just a quick clarification about, if you look through Title 8 in that public ways, there's a specific ordinance for park strips. So this is different and separate from park strips, which are assumed to be appended to your property and part of the road right of way, which is your responsibility as a property owner to maintain. So there's just some clarity there, and maybe there's some clarifying language in the definitions to make sure that we don't get, future councils or staff members who start to apply the same requirements to park strips as they do in other areas. Because those, of course, allow sprinkler systems and other improvements, fixed structures, mailboxes, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so important, if you decide to proceed with this, would be the do's and don'ts. Right, here's what you can do, make sure that's clarified. If somebody doesn't do that, then you've got enforcement. So it does become potentially, not that everyone would do that, but we do have 300 parcels this could apply to in the city. Mr. Call?
And we would probably anticipate with this some sort of an administrative process where we send a letter to each of these folks every year, reminding them of their responsibilities and the obligations, so that it's clear and it doesn't ever become lost in the years of government.
Any other questions for Mr. Hess? Councilman Palpas?
Since this is something that Councilman Swanson had asked you to look into, other than the sprinkler scenario and how that might pan out, we might have to figure out, was there any major hesitation on your side, on the staff side, that says I do or do not think this is a good idea? I'm just kind of curious.
We're going to be entering into a new active transportation plan, and those trail networks often use not old, but creek right of ways or accesses to detention and other stormwater utilization if we do have those rights of ways. So there are certain areas that you'd want to look at with pretty fine tooth comb and make sure that you're not offering up a land lease, letting somebody do some sort of, legacy garden or some other major improvement that would then be ripped out in a few years if we came back through and did pedestrian trail or bike path or something. So that's probably the biggest one that's a cause for pause. The other ones, I think we already have people, at times who are throwing grass clippings over their back fence and into storm detention basins and drainage ways and that sort of thing. This might clarify when that is and isn't appropriate. It's never appropriate, but it might clarify that. And, there's all manner of things when you have public property right next to private property. You get rope swings and tree houses and other things. So I think in some ways this would just clarify what those do's and don'ts are and might be sort of like a code enforcement ordinance that we can lean on as much as it is for those property owners who just want to beautify an area, their ability to do it. So no major other.
Of course, just being realistic, we're not gonna get a lot of code enforcement. We can't keep up with what we've got now. I mean, as we talked about, it's kind of a reactive code enforcement right now. So just having the open discussion of what we're doing here. And I don't think anyone's adverse to the use of the property maintained, but the administrative burden that could be placed upon code enforcement in the city, and just want us to be aware of that. What other questions do you have?
I don't have any other. We'll bring back a clean version of the ordinance with an ordinance number for council's consideration. If you have any thoughts between now and the next meeting, or when we might, I'd say in the next 10 days or so, send me your thoughts and comments, and we'll make sure those are put in.
So can I just clarify, Scott, you said if we have any thoughts?
Any thoughts?
So we get a response from us there.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And we don't have any thoughts between now and then. Great. Thank you, Mr. Hess.
That's pretty scary. You start opening my brain.
All right, Mr. Call, you wanted to lead a discussion about North Ogden City properties and short-term leases.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So council, this one piggybacks on what Scott was just talking about. And a couple of years ago, we had this discussion with the council about what constitutes a significant parcel of property. And at that time, the council said everything, which is leases, rentals, everything that the city owns qualifies as a significant parcel of property, meaning that we have to go through the formal hearing and public process to declare something surplus before we can even sign a lease. So the language that's showing up in this is that same provision we talked about, and this might have been, this probably predated most of you on the council, but this would add a provision that says, hey, if it's a piece of property that's leased for less than 2 years, we're not going to call it a significant piece of property, which then opens the door for essentially the, and this language isn't in here, but we would, before we pass this, when we brought this back to you, we would want to add some language where the council says, this is who we want to make the decision on those parcels. And a good example is with what we just talked about, it would probably make a lot of sense to be approved by the mayor and the community economic development director or the city manager. 2 of the 3 of us have to approve it, type of a thing. And so that's the type of language that we would add to this. The idea being that it's not just an automatic, someone has all the rights, but it wouldn't have to bring everything to the council for every one of those 300 pieces of property. So it's a little bit simpler language than the other one you'll wrestle with, but it might have bigger implications because it is the council offloading some of the power under the state statute to individuals who don't sit on this board.
So John, I have a question, kind of a risk management question. We have some very capable individuals in the city. They could make a piece of property look very nice, even though it's limited, but they can put, drought tolerant grass and, make it look really nice. So now we are encouraging people to be on that property, probably more so. What happens if somebody gets injured on that when it's being maintained under a lease that you're proposing? How would that work? Just want to make sure I
So for the individual who's doing the work on it, they would probably see more liability or be at greater risk of liability, especially if there is a lease. If it was just a park strip, for example, in front of someone's house, they would have a certain amount of liability because it's something they installed on that property and they would give the permission to. If they didn't install anything or take any control, then obviously the city would, in theory, be the only party liable. So there is a risk to the resident for some additional liability for taking control of these and maintaining them.
And probably some increased risk to the city because people would be encouraged to maybe be on that property more so with it looking nicer and better.
Yeah,
What else do you need from us this evening, John?
so I think some direction on which group or which individuals you'd like to approve this, assuming the council would like to add this as an option in the code.
Councilmember Swanson?
I think the mayor would be an appropriate person. And I'd rather see it in the form of an agreement than a lease.
Okay.
I think we legally, I'm no attorney, I think legally we can accomplish the same desires with an agreement than an act, than a lease.
Go ahead.
Is there some provision also for the size of the property? I mean, we've got it for, kind of something that would be a short term, but maybe some language regarding can't be any larger than X size.
Sure.
So that might be,
Half acre, quarter acre?
that would be a question for Scott. Scott, how many little pieces do we have adjacent to properties that, and how big are they that someone would be interested in doing something like this?
I honestly can't answer that question right now, but we can easily find out.
Okay.
I think that's a good point though, because if you look at the end of the street I live on,
Mhm.
and the Morgans are at the end of that street, all that big parcel is right basically in their backyard. So they could, I guess, turn that into a soccer field or.
I can't put grass down.
Yeah, as long as it's drought tolerant grass, they can.
No sprinklers.
So I'll bring back some language that gives us size without a specific number, but we'll bring back some recommendations on numbers for the council.
Okay.
Okay, council, any other questions or comments on that? John, did I give you adequate direction?
Yep.
All right, let's move on to item number 6. I believe this was brought back by Councilmember Severing. So he will lead the discussion on this. This is an action to consider a property located at approximately 234 East, 3900 North, as surplus property. Potentially to be sold by the city. So do you want to proceed, Councilmember Severing?
Yes, I sure do, Mayor. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I will. Actually, quite honestly, this was both Councilman Barker and myself who wanted to see this brought back to council. There was no motion, and therefore the motion that Councilman Barker had.
There was a motion.
Well,
Motion.
There was no second.
there was no second, yeah, the motion, there was no response to the motion. So that gave us the opportunity to bring it back, and I'll just tell you why I felt strongly, and I think Councilmember Barker agrees with me. I had been involved with this a little bit back in probably November, December. Sadly, I wasn't at the meeting on the 13th of December, but when I came back home and read the minutes, I just felt like there was kind of another side to the story. And I thought it was kind of interesting as I was walking in here tonight, somebody said to me, "It's interesting that one property is back up on the agenda today." Did they just realize that they were people who were stealing property? And I made the comment, I said, I don't know if I would jump to that conclusion that quick. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I also realize that there's another side to every story. So I was kind of curious and began doing some additional research. And Councilman Barker did the same kind of research that I did. We did it independently, actually. And we came up with the same conclusion. That technically there was actually 3 individuals. Clint Willis, you'll see, if you could go to the letter, would you please, John? That Clint had written.
Yeah.
I think it's just important to note here that, let me get there myself real quickly. That Clint and his wife had purchased the property. Maybe just real quickly too, John, can you just show the picture of the property where it shows the line and so forth? So as we've been here talking about leasing or not leasing, but giving people the opportunity to use land that's next to their property. For public and those who are here, you can see the size of property that the Willises had requested to be able to purchase from the city. Now, can we catch the letter, John? I'm going to kind of jump around just a little bit because I like to kind of do this in a little bit of a sequence. You'll notice on this letter, I wish there was a date on it, but it would have had to have been, and Clint is here. Clint, when did you write this letter?
It was before that first meeting originally.
So it would have been back in,
Almost the first time I recall it. Yeah, around August, September
of 2022.
22.
So there have been a couple of threads of text that have been posted on both our emails and John has one on here, but what I have written down as a timeline is that in January 2020, Clint meets with Robert Scott. And Rob Scott tells Clint he's okay with the use of the property as long as he gets permission from the Public Works. Then the next timeline, Clint meets with both Dave Espinoza and Lauren Gardner, who tell them they are okay with this proposal as long as there is space for the city to enter the basin. So by my calculations, there's 3 people who have said, Clint, as long as you give us access to the detention basin, it's okay for you to use it. Now, John, I'm not sure if you were, did you actually include that one thread of text that I had sent you?
So it's not in the packet, but I can pull it up if you'd like it.
Would you please?
While he's pulling that up, Councilmember Severing. How does the text in there that is inquiring of Dave if he's talked to the mayor about it? Because
That's actually the one.
Yeah, Dave is representing that he said that I'd have to talk to the mayor about it.
Right. Mayor, I'm glad you asked that question because in my mind, it depends on how you read that particular thread. Because as I read it, if you'll notice the dates, I think the first one from a distance, John, I can't read it, but isn't the first one where Clint is inquiring of Dave, isn't that like February 20?
Yep.
20. Hi, David, I'm going to start landscaping and put the fence in this weekend. Have you heard anything from the mayor on that? Well, if you notice, the very next response is not even until March 18th. So almost a month is gone on that thread and still no response. So I'm just thinking that in my perspective, I can't help but wonder if Clint and his wife just felt that there was a preliminary approval and that getting a response back from the mayor was somewhat formal, but nowhere along the line is there a, Clint, you need to stop. You need to stop. We're telling you right now, we need to stop. So in my opinion, as we look at the land use permit application, if you could go there too, John. I think Clint's made his very serious due diligence. Because then he comes in and applies for being able to put up his fence in May, so the fence not put up yet. There was plenty of time for there to be complete clarity as to whether this was approved or not approved. So in the spirit of our just previous discussion. If John, if you'll just go back to. If you'll just go back to all of the pictures that Clint's has taken and sent. Move down to just the pictures of the landscaping that Clint and his wife have put in, could you please? So in the spirit of an ordinance where we're going to give people the opportunity to either lease ground or just to use ground next to public ground, I think the Willises have done a pretty good job if you just kind of scan through each of those photos. But it doesn't seem to me the city's done a pretty good job.
Councilmember Severing, you're aware that the potential ordinance would prohibit fencing of property?
I do.
One other question, just so I get my facts straight. In February of 2020 is when Clint said, I'm gonna proceed. Is that right?
According to the thread,
And when was the application for the land use permit
In May.
fencing? May of
2020,
2020?
I believe.
Well, it's,
Wasn't it later?
I thought it was substantially
I
later.
thought it was
Oh,
2
it may
years
have been.
later.
What is the date on that, John? I'm just trying to get the facts straight.
I guess the big question is, when did you install the fence, Clint?
In 2020,
With or without a land use permit?
without,
Because,
nobody told me to get one.
Well.
and you thought that
I
was
don't want to
part of.
interface between, I think we gotta keep the discussion up here. But, Clint, you're in this line of business. You're a developer, so land use permits are pretty common to put up that size of fence. So I think to say that it was unknown that someone needed a land use permit to put up that type of fence. And it looks like that happened, the permit was in 2022. Is that correct? Am I reading the date there?
That's the date shown on it, yeah.
And I've got estimated completion date 5/15/2020 on the land use permit application.
Well, that's because the fence was already up.
Was already out.
They were
Oh,
applying
he
for the permit
He
after the
essentially
fence.
backdated it, so that's the way I read that.
Okay, what else do you have, Councilmember Severing?
Well, so my point just simply here is this. We've just talked about giving citizens the right to be able to use public ground to be able to beautify it. In my opinion, it seems like in this situation, we kind of have a win-win where the city gets the opportunity to Public Works has one less piece of ground to maintain. The neighbors of the Willises see a piece of ground that is landscaped and beautified. The money the Willises pay for the land is placed back in city funds, though at this point it might actually able to be leased. And the city still maintains access to the basin. I just see this as a win-win situation.
Okay.
And not necessarily a,
Do you have a motion you'd like to make?
well, first I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say that I think, I'm not saying that this is gonna convert anybody to the thought of selling it. But it does, in many cases, kind of lend itself to the fact that there is an opposite side to the story. And I don't know so much as Clinton was a thief in this process. Councilman Barker, anything you want to add?
Nope, that's about it.
Okay, so the agenda item, Councilmember Swanson is calling for a motion to consider
Councilmember Swanson.
or declare
You mean separate?
severing, sorry. Kind of sounds the same. I mean, it starts with. So Councilmember Severing, the agenda item is a motion to declare property located at approximately 234 east, 3900 north to be considered surplus property by the council.
Yes,
Is that the motion you would like to make?
that's the motion I would like to make.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's enter into discussion now. Council, do you have Councilmember Barker?
Just curious, regarding our discussion earlier, if we don't surplus this, then we can't lease it. or go into any agreement?
Under the new ordinance, it would still be available for lease, assuming that the version that would not leave it as a significant parcel of property is approved by the council in the future. Meaning, I would anticipate that the new language we're talking about tonight would allow this to be a leased parcel in the future or via agreement or something like that.
Okay,
Okay, Councilmember Swanson.
I appreciate the work that Councilmember Severing and Councilmember Barker have done on this. There isn't any information presented tonight that we didn't have at the last meeting. My biggest concern continues to be, it's clear to me on the text thread from February 20th, 2020, that approval from someone higher than our public works director was clearly indicated, because the applicant is asking if that approval has been given. The fact that a month or 2 months or 10 months goes by without that approval or disapproval going by does not justify assuming the approval. I'm just going to do it because I haven't heard one way or the other. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. We can't operate that way, that kind of tacit approval that I'll give you some kind of artificial deadline or some kind of period by which you, the governing authority, have to respond to me. And if you don't, then that automatically decides the issue in my favor. We simply, that's chaos, and we can't do that. One of the reasons that I asked for the ordinance that we discussed earlier to be written was so that we can accommodate something like this. I have, with what the Willises have done, I think it's great that they want to take care of it. My only issue is the fence. It's public property. It can't be fenced off from the public unless there's a safety reason, like a detention basin or something like that. So if the fence were to come down and go along the property line, I wouldn't have any problem with the improvements. So anyway, that's how I feel.
Okay. Anyone else on the motion to declare this surplus property? Councilmember Delpez.
In the house that I previously owned, when I moved into the house, I noticed that my fence was about 10 feet further to the north than all of my other neighbors. That's strange. And so I asked the previous owner, I said, hey, what's this all about? What's the backstory? Can you explain it to me? And she said, oh, well, I have a signed document from the owner that says I'm allowed to put a fence on the property in the way that it was. And I just kind of treated it as, okay, I've got a little bit of bonus room that at some point someone said is okay, but it wasn't legally notarized. It didn't feel like it would stand up in any sort of court. And so I kind of just treated it that way. And come to find out, when the property to the north developed, there was an error in the property, and that 10 feet of property was essentially taken away from me. And I was kind of totally okay with that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm kind of in line with what Councilman Swanson is saying, is the no response is not an approval in any way. I'm really concerned about, there wasn't a response, so I'm just eventually going to go forward with this. And so that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Okay, we have a
Just, I can,
Councilmember Exton.
yes, thanks. I am, I want residents to have some sort of ownership feeling as far as it's a community thing. It makes me really concerned about any individual taking a part of public property and making it a part of, in any way, making it feel like it's theirs. If you want to beautify something for the sake of everybody around you, fabulous, but make sure that it's accessed by everyone else. I think the new language that we have in the new ordinance, as far as specifying really clearly, no fences, no irrigation systems, things like that, just making it really clear that this is meant for everybody. And, they aren't making any more land, so I want it to stay, whatever North Ogden City owns, I really want it to keep it North Ogden City owned. So, yeah, I am still of the same mind as I was before. It's unfortunate. I hate to see work and money kind of wasted, but it was done sort of, fire, aim. So I feel bad, but that's it.
Okay, thank you, and appreciate the comments, appreciate the research done by Councilmember Severing. I do believe that making the decisions, we try to do this without emotion. And try to do, I think there is some hope if, and how the council votes here. With Councilmember Swanson's proposal, but with that, let's vote on the motion if there are no further discussions. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against the motion, say aye
Renee.
Or nay.
or nay.
Nay.
Nay. Let me get this down here. So we have three nays. One yay. Yeah, I should have said yay. I'm sorry, 2 yays. Okay, motion does not pass on 3-2 vote. We'll move on now to item number 7. This discussion will be led by Councilmember Swanson. You would like to discuss an action to consider light sound improvements at the amphitheater.
Thank you, Mayor.
Swanson?
Council, last year, we were awarded a ramp grant in the amount of $147,000 and change as a contribution from ramp towards sound and lighting for the amphitheater. At that time, we discussed that we would budget $147,500. We discussed that we would that the city would budget $75,000 of the match, the $150,000 match, and that we would take the new and somewhat unique approach that we would ask the citizens for the additional 75,000 to match that. In the last year, there hasn't really been anything done towards approaching businesses or gathering the additional $75,000. There's been some preliminary stuff done, but nothing of note. We are at the in the contract that we have with RAMP, we are expected to complete this particular project on or before June 30th, 2023, or ask for an extension. If they grant the extension, they will grant us more time to get it done, or they have the freedom to ask us to return the money, including interest that would be calculated on the time that we were holding the money after it was awarded to us. John has been working on a business plan for the amphitheater. Just a couple of notes from the business plan. The goals of the amphitheater would be to provide a facility that is accessible and easy to utilize for non-professional cultural events. Provide programming, access, and training to the community and cultural disciplines. Make our facility available for musical, cultural, historical, and informational programming that celebrates and expresses the diversity of the community. And there's 3 pages here of actually, no, 5 pages here of information. It's a rough draft, but obviously we'll need to do some fine tuning. What I'm requesting as we go into this budget session is that we go ahead and front the additional $75,000 so that we have the match, so that we can get done the work that RAMP is expecting us, initially expected us to have done here in just a couple of months. We'll undoubtedly need to apply for the extension hopefully, I think the ramp will grant us that extension. But I think it will be beneficial for us to get that extension if we can show them that we've committed to the full match. And that we're moving forward with getting new bids and cost information on getting the light and the sounds. It's hard to implement a business plan for the amphitheater when it is incomplete. It's kind of like building pickleball courts, but not putting up nets, or a swimming pool and not putting in water. It's there. The primary skeleton, most of it is there, but critical components to really make it usable and, more importantly, successful are not there. I am more than happy to take on the role of championing the private community for whatever funds we can get from them. But I think in this budget season, we should go ahead and fund that additional roll over the 75,000 that we had from last year that went unused. Budget the additional 75,000 so that we can show ramp that we're serious about utilizing the funds that they've given us. We all received today an email just this evening as I was, where did I put that? There it is, right there, from a Mr. Sean Casey, who is a resident who has some expertise in sound systems and such, and the music business. I don't know how much theatrical, I'm not sure. But he has offered to volunteer his expertise to help us understand what it is we may need from a sound and electronics control. And I think we can put his expertise to use, understanding that we'll have to go out to bid, correct, John? Once we have an idea of what it is we need, we'll have to go out to bid and then go through a process of selecting the current bidder. So that's where we are. We're going to miss out on, because we did not get the lights and sound done this year. During this last year, we will miss out on a portion of or all of this year's potential use, expanded use of the amphitheater, because we just don't have the lights and sound, and not many groups are in a position where they can rent their own lights and sound and bring it with them and set it up to use it. I think it has the opportunity to be a great community, Mayor, as you've mentioned many times, a great community theater, maybe on occasion a larger production that comes through or wants to use it, but we've got to have the equipment there in order for it to be used. So that's the request of you, council, is that we consider that as we look at the budget here in the coming weeks.
And John, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we could get those under this year's budget. If we move.
So currently in the budget, we've budgeted the full expenditure for the improvements. We also did budget the 75,000 in donations, as well as the 147 coming from ramp as revenues. But we do have the total expenditure budgeted this year. And so if the council was indicating they wanted to move forward, we would start the process of getting bids and things. I'd meet with Mr. Casey and get some ideas on how to get that proposal out to.
And there's a probability that could be done in this budget year. As you know, I was kind of one that suggested we go for a ramp grant, because I think that's been the feedback on why we haven't had use at the amphitheater. I think the bands and stuff we have had, most of them do have their own equipment. I would say I'm kind of a realist, and I know John has met with some community members. We actually had a committee together to try to raise funds, but as Councilmember Swanson said, no one has taken action. Part of my motivation was, just speaking frankly, is the amphitheater has become almost non-existent. We're not getting comments against, we're not getting comments for. So I was hoping by engaging the community that we could generate some interest. As you know, I'm a believer, if you have ownership, you're invested in something, you do that. I would say, Councilmember Swanson, I appreciate your willingness to go out and try to raise 75,000. But my experience has said, once this, if the council approves that, that diminishes your chance, as good as you are at talking and raising money, it would substantially diminish the chance of raising that money. You've heard me refer to the amphitheater as a community gathering place, where we want to make that part of having our North Ogden a community, not a city. But I think this takes it to the next level of investing this $300,000, takes that to the next level above a community gathering place. And I spent a couple hours this morning with John and Jamie. I think I mentioned that to you, Councilmember Swanson, regarding that. If we're going to put that in, what is our plan then to generate, take it up to that next level where we do get interest in people using the facility with the intention of, because what I look at now is the investment we have is what I would call an investment for a community gathering place. Further investments are going to make that, elevate that up. So John would tell you this morning, I asked in the budget, there was no revenue for next year from the amphitheater. And I said, well, wait a minute, if we're going to make an additional investment, we need to have a plan to utilize that investment. And so I think John and Jamie are going back as part of his business plan to do that. But, I recognize your dogmatic style to go get that money, but I don't want to disappoint. I think once, if the council makes that decision, the real thing is, we're not going to raise the money. It's going to be a council city expenditure into the facility. That's just kind of a realistic. And John, correct me also on this, but isn't RAP kind of a reimbursement? We put the money out and then they reimburse us after we spend the money.
Correct.
So in that regards, but I would say if we're going to do that, let's just try to get it done this year and move forward. But that was my thought process, because we have to have a plan to get people to utilize that sound and lights. So that they're aware of that and what it can be used for and how we're going to get people to use the system with the lights and the sound there. Because if we just put that in and nothing changes, we're going to kind of probably have a little feedback on, where we're at. So just my thoughts. Councilmember Swanson.
I agree with you, Mayor. I understand that there is a diminishing likelihood of us raising the full 75. I think from what we've seen this last year, nobody's beaten down the doors to help us raise this, to give us the 75 either. And two donors that I've spoken to who are still willing to write checks are willing to do so when they, in their words, see that the city is committed to the amphitheater and making it a usable facility. They're not writing checks at the moment is due to what they feel is the city council and mayor not supporting the amphitheater and making it use, just their words.
Send them to talk to me, because I would challenge they're entitled to their opinion. But once again, as you know,
their opinion is preventing a check from being written, and so
that's what matters. However, I would say that I've been pretty supportive. I was the one that brought this idea up.
Understand.
And the perception is reality.
Yeah.
And I would just say that there's some that will not be satisfied until that thing is completed to phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is an additional $4 or $5 million expenditure, which I think, what the likelihood of that happening in the near future is pretty remote, not impossible, but I would call it very remote. But anyway, would you like to make a motion or?
Yeah, Mayor, I'd make a motion then that we go ahead if it's feasible within this year's budget. I hadn't talked to John and Jamie to see if it was feasible. Appreciate you doing that. That if it's feasible within this budget, that we go ahead and we commit those funds and we get the sound and the lights done. And we put together an enthusiastic committee that is looking to make that facility as successful as we possibly can. We have some great talent in the city that can do that.
And I think that that's an important aspect of if the council moves forward with this. Is because by doing nothing, result will be nothing, right?
And I'm happy to leave. I'm happy to take the.
So
lead on that.
you know, if the council approves this, we need to have a plan to go out and utilize the facility,
Absolutely.
being caused by the installation of lights and sound.
Right. Understanding that it won't happen all overnight. We won't, can't just snap our fingers and then suddenly
We'll
we'll
give you 3 weeks.
come to life. Can I have 5.5?
We give you a couple weeks. Yeah, it is gonna take some time, but I just wanna make sure that we understand our obligation now. If we're going to invest, really, it's 300,000 because it is all taxpayers' money. Coming from the city that. And I told Councilmember Swanson, I thought it was a fair proposal. And I still think it's fair, but I'm thoroughly happy to listen to what the council has to say. I think we all want to make sure that that is a utilized facility within the resources that we have to make it a good facility. So,
Realistic plan.
okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Swanson. We'll have discussion. Are you gonna second the motion there?
No, go ahead.
Would anyone like to second Councilmember Swanson's motion?
I second it.
Have a second by Councilmember Ekstrom. Now we'll have discussion. Councilmember Severing, did you have?
Well, I was just thinking, so for clarity with Councilman Swanson's proposal, motion. That is, are you saying, Councilman Swanson, that we're just gonna front that money?
Yes.
And therefore there will not be any contribution from the citizens?
So we're still gonna go after contributions, but we're going to front the money and get it done. Get
We
the
won't
lights
turn
and
down,
sound.
we won't turn down
We won't turn it
contributions,
down.
but we would make Councilmember Swanson's job extremely difficult.
It's already difficult. They're already unwilling to give.
More difficult now. That's what I'm saying. Is it realistic to assume we're gonna get contributions? But we'll try. We'll try. You don't try, you don't get any results. So we'll give Councilmember Swanson his 5.5 weeks to raise the money. So. All right, any other questions from council? Councilmember Barker?
Just some thoughts I have. I've got mixed feelings. How many years ago did we have somebody come asking for pickleball courts? And we told them, go raise some money and then we'll put them in. And that's like 4 or 5 years ago. They're coming in this year now because we've got donations now, finally. For the Cherry Days, what, in 20, when the citizens led it the first time, Mark Miller came here and asked for $10,000 to support Cherry Days. And as a council, we said, well, what if we say no? And he said, I've got a donor already. And okay, then why are we going to give you the money? So we've said that to another person. So my feelings are, if we front the money, we're not getting any donations. They're not coming in. Because why would you donate to something that's already been funded?
And that's a very good question.
And then what happens if some of our other parks that we've had them front money, or
We haven't done it for any other park.
we've got a water park that's coming that the developer's paying for. What if he pulls out and says, no, I don't want to pay for it anymore because the city will just pick it up?
That was part of the.
He's contractually obligated.
That was part of the contract.
Well,
But I think the fact is we have asked.
we've asked for a lot of stuff.
And that's okay. I
What-
think I'm a
Pickleball
believer.
court could be then, what if the cement gets pulled out now because the city will just pay for it?
Well, you know, and I am a believer, just my personal opinion, that you help support what you create. And so the more you're invested in things, the more chance there is for success.
Yep.
But I think, you know, both Councilmember Swanson and Councilmember Barker's comments are we have asked, you know, we've got the drone, I think, for the police department, we're asking for contributions. But at some point in time too, as you ask for too many contributions, you know, you diminish your ability to raise money too. So, you know, we've got quite a few things, you know, going right now, but valid comments from everyone so far. Councilmember Ekstrom.
All right. Well, my opinion about this is that right now it's a kind of a shell. We can kind of put some things in. When we bring in outside lights and sound, it's diminished quality. You can't hear very well. So therefore, the experience someone has when they're sitting there is kind of meh. You know, you're kind of straining to hear. And so anyway, this is kind of just basic. If we want to have an amphitheater where even the community can come and put on a production, you need to have some basic level of service. And I think that's true of any park we have, right? It's like we have to have some sort of investment. I think if we put in the lights and sound, there are certainly many other projects dealing with the amphitheater that can make it more kind of like commercially or financially viable, whatever we want to do, that will then be more likely to be successful if we start, you know, with this investment. So it's like, okay, we're going to do this, and then we're going to put on some productions that are going to be more successful because there's good lights and sound.
Yeah.
So then, you know, then we can go out and get, it's like, okay, well, now we need seats. Now we need this, you know what I mean? There's lots of things to make it really, you know, better, but you know, this is like basic functionality. that
I don't
talking
think
about.
the discussion is if it needs lights or sound. I think that
Well,
decision-
but funding
that
it,
decision has been made. It's
right.
I think the question on the table here is the funding mechanism, not whether it needs lights and sound. So it's the funding
Sure.
mechanism. And I appreciate your optimism. But if you can't raise $75,000 for the basics, you're gonna have a heck of a time raising money for the non-essentials. Because
That's a difference of opinion.
if we had people
So-
lined up that was like representative, we wouldn't have the time getting this. We
Okay,
have not had people lined up to.
but can I finish, Mayor? Because you interrupted me.
Well, my prerogative to do so,
It's your prerogative to interrupt me?
yes. Call the question. We have a motion on the table.
Okay,
Well, go ahead. But go ahead.
I guess I'm done.
Hold on, shouldn't she? I told her she could go ahead.
Well,
After you
After
interrupted
you
her, told her she
interrupted
was
me
done.
and then told me you had the
Uncalled for,
prerogative
Mayor.
to
That was uncalled
interrupt me.
Go
I
ahead.
thought I
My
had the floor.
apologies.
Okay, according to Robert's Rules of Order, when I have the floor, I have the ability to actually give my opinion that I was elected to give.
Go ahead.
So we have a responsibility to provide things for the park. I think this is completely in line with that. We have the budget, we have put the money in, you know, it's, you know, we started something, and I hate to see us just pull back and say, oh, now question. Let's, you know, in for a pound, in for a penny, in for a pound. Get it done, and then let's get some momentum going. But, you know, if we have sort of this equivocation all of the time, there is not the real commitment felt by other people. As a business owner, if I were going to put my money in, I'm kind of with the people that Phil has talked to. It's like, okay, well, let's put lights and sound, and let's do some, you know, a few really good productions, and let's see what it can do with some really professionally installed lights and sound. And then have people enjoy it. I mean, that's the point of the amphitheater to me, is to have people gather, see their neighbors and friends performing on a stage that is not just, you know, with bad lights and sound. So to me, I think this is, you know, just continuation on for a commitment that was made years ago. Let's just finish, you know, go forward. It's a step forward that the city can take, that we can afford to take. That's okay. That's
Thank you. So once again, we have a motion on the table for the city to fund this. Are there any other further discussions or questions at this time? Councilman Gallup has.
I think if we fund this additional $75,000 in this year's budget, I think it would get the amphitheater to a more viable point that we can prove it out. And so I know that there is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 of the amphitheater. I don't think we're gonna have to go much further after this one. I think this would be the last commitment that we need to make for a very long time to have it to a very usable point.
Okay. Anything else? All right, let's take a vote on this then. Let's start with Councilmember Delpas,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing.
Come back to me, Kate.
Sure.
I'd like to hear Blake's vote in the order that it was asked.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
That's
I would
okay.
like to.
All right. Councilmember Severin?
You know, I love the principle that you suggested, Mayor, about ownership. I think that's a really, really good thing. On the flip side, I can also see the value of getting it up and functioning, so you don't have to worry about it anymore, right? And then we can begin to move things forward. So there's a part of me that wants to say, so we don't have to come back and visit this now for many, many years. I'm in favor of going ahead and just funding it, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore in the future.
So that's
We'll just
yes.
make it successful.
Yes, well.
Yep.
Okay, Councilmember Esco,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker,
No, I think we should get an extension and keep trying.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes on a 4-1 vote. Okay. Well,
We're gonna need to get that extension anyway.
hopefully we can get that done then this year, John, if you would, proceed along.
Okay.
We probably need a budget amendment. To reduce the contribution side of that, I think was on the revenue side. Because I think the expenditure is already budgeted. But I do like the fact that, the city needs to keep its commitments, and so we do have a couple of big commitments that we need to continue to address. All right, let's go on to the interlocal agreement with Pleasant View City. John, you'd like to address that agreement? It's agreement number A03-2023.
So council, this is the agreement that we had talked about with Pleasant View. Where they are essentially agreeing to contribute some money to the operations and basically utilities and some overhead for the senior center. And the way we came to the $12,000 number was that it's about 20% of the annual operating expenses for the facility with utilities and our contribution to the county for the employee that they send to the facility. Pleasant View has signed this agreement. They approved it 2 weeks ago at their council meeting. And they are still going to continue to contribute $5,000 to the Northview Senior Citizens Group, which is a separate entity from us. So they're actually increasing their contribution by 12,000, not just 7,000, and giving it all to North Ogden City. And it's a 3-year agreement. That either party could get out of at any time with 90 days notice. And I think with this is also an expectation from Pleasant View and a commitment from us that we will ask the other cities who have residents who come here to also participate under this same agreement. And I do know that I don't think it was a unanimous vote at Pleasant View, although it might have been. But there were some questions and things they worked through, and the council talked about it and ultimately passed it in Pleasant View. It's before us today. Any questions?
Any questions for John?
Who all worked on this from our city? Mayor, you were involved?
Well, or I think John worked with Amy, their city council, their city administrator. I did talk with Mayor Call and I think it was brought up by you, Councilmember Swanson.
Well, it's something we've talked about the entire time I've been on the council every year. It's awesome to see that they are willing to do this and grateful that they were willing to do that.
I think the Mayor Call's response was, nobody's ever asked us. So I said, okay, we're asking.
Formally, yeah.
So in any event, we have to have a contribution to operating that. Do we have a motion to accept the agreement A03-2023?
Hey, Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve agreement A03-2023 with Pleasant View City relating to this Northview Senior Center.
Thank you,
Second.
Councilmember Barker.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Swanson. Is there any further discussion on it? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Councilmember Severin.
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpas.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item number 9. Susan Nance, our city recorder, will be leading this discussion. This is to consider an interlocal agreement with Weber County to handle our upcoming elections. I think the one this year in 2025, those two elections. Susan?
Right. Yeah, so our current interlocal agreement for elections has expired, and as mentioned by the mayor, we're looking forward to 2023 and 2025. As seen in Exhibit B, it indicates the cost that actually is what they charge us per, I guess, per registered voter. We have 12,204, and the rate is $2.25 for a total of 27,459. This is a separate charge, meaning like the primary election is one of those, then if we don't have one, we don't get charged, right? And then, but you can plan on the general election. So if you have both, that's a total of almost 55,000. So that's where we're at.
Okay, any questions, Councilmember Swanson? Then we'll go to Councilmember Barker.
So if we ended up having a primary and a general, our cost would be nearly $55,000. Are you kidding me? That's crazy compared to what we paid in the past.
Well, sometimes we have a bond, like in 2021, we had the school bond, and then they would split the mailings out with us, the cost. And so that helps sometimes, but I'm not aware of any bond on the ballot at this point that would offset that. So yes, every time we have a primary, it's that much money. Well, it's gone up obviously this year compared to about 5,000 more, I would guess. So you'll see that in my budget.
Yeah, so as you said.
Our option is pay it or not have an election.
At this point, you can help hand count it with me.
But you're right, it's about $54,500 in next year's budget. To enter into the agreement, so you're correct.
That's crazy.
Okay, Councilmember Barker.
How do we know we have 12,204 registered voters? Because isn't our population only 21,000? So they're saying over half of our population is registered voters.
They look at the voter registration rolls.
Okay, but so for all of us families that have more than 3 or 4 kids, because I can tell you there's a lot of kids at the junior highs and elementaries in our city. I saw this number, I've seen it from Northview Fire, and if you think that's big, wait till you see the fire district, it's $60,000 is what they're saying our projected value is gonna be per election. Because we cover 3 cities and we're just trying to figure out where are all these registered voters, and if our population is 21,000, how is 12,000 of them registered voters?
They're registered, they just don't vote.
Yeah, but you gotta be over 18 to be read. That's what, okay, I disagree with math here, but that's okay.
I don't know.
I have 6 kids, 4 of them are
Yes.
registered voters.
I
don't think we have the capacity.
No,
to
we
run
can't,
elections
we can't,
on our own, so
right,
we're kind of
there's nothing we can do.
alternatives. Okay, do we have a motion to enter into agreement A 4-2023?
Mayor, I move that we approve agreement A 04-2023. An interlocal agreement with Weber County Clerk's Office for elections.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Second by Councilmember Dalpas, motion by Councilmember Swanson. We'll take a roll call vote on this. Councilmember Barker.
A reluctant yes.
Okay, well.
Don't have a choice.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
No.
Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Severin.
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpas.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. All right, we're on item number 10 now, regarding some reports. Council members, we'll first hear Councilmember Severin has anything he'd like council to understand, help with, or
Yeah, I sure do. I
then
just
we'll
got
go to Councilmember Extra.
Thank you, Mayor. Here's some details from Chief Quinney. Spring's around the corner. Remember, RVs will start coming out of storage. Please double check the city's RV parking ordinance with help on where RVs can be parked and stored. Second bullet point, the police department will be participating in a drug take back event on April 22nd between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Smith's for your expired and unused medications, where we will make sure they're properly disposed of. Winter parking season comes to an end tomorrow. The police department would like to thank everyone for their help this winter, keeping vehicles out of the path of our snowplows. And Dave's like, The police department, last but not least, would like to recognize the great work of our snowplow drivers. Thank you, Dave. This year it has been a snowy year, but vehicle accidents due to the weather have been kept relatively low. Thank you, snowplow, men and women. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ekstrom, Public Works. please.
Okay. The Public Works Department is starting to transition from winter duties such as snow plowing, kind of exclusively snow plowing this year, to spring duties like flood management, cleaning off grates and making sure creeks are free from blockages. The only channels that we have seen start to flow are the ones on the west side of town, and they're also servicing all the small equipment that that had been winterized for the park crew, and the water department is preparing for the springs to pick flows. So we've got all of our artesian wells that are starting to fill up, which we are grateful for, and hopefully we will, knock on wood, have plenty of water in our residential supply this year. That's it.
Okay. Any questions for Councilmember Ekstrom or with Councilmember Bradley? All right, seeing none, we'll now have public comments. John, once again, if you would keep an eye on those who are with us electronically. Those who are here, if you'd like to make a comment, you can step up to the podium and state your name and limit your comments to 5 minutes, please.
Sandy Cochran, I'm a North Ogden resident. At our budget review subcommittee meeting, roughly 3 weeks ago, I brought up the subject of the amphitheater and I asked who was doing the fundraising. And John Call said it was him, and I asked how that was going, and I plan on going back and watching that meeting again, but I'm fairly certain the response I got was he knew where almost all the money was coming from. So it's kind of shocking now to hear there's no idea where any of these contributions would come from. I also remember when the committee, the council agreed to budget for 75,000 and raise the other 75,000. And I think that's what the citizens of this city were expecting you to do. And I remember during the Truth and Taxation meeting, how many people walked up to the microphone and said, shut the amphitheater, close the doors, don't put another penny into it until the city has more money. So I'm shocked that you all took the vote you did tonight. You could have waited, you could have discussed it, put it off for a while, and gave the citizens of the city a chance to tell you how they feel about it, but you didn't.
Hey, do we have anyone else who would like to make a comment tonight? Chris?
Chris Baldwin, North Ogden. We talked about public works and streets and stuff like that. I guess the question I had was, I know there's a website for potholes and stuff like that, but there's a couple of ones that I haven't reported. And I guess that's the only reason I'm asking is it something that they patrol as well? Because I know there's a couple on Fruitland Drive that almost, we could like lose a kid in it. I don't know if those have been fixed, but it just, I get neighbors that say, oh, well, you go to city council and why don't you go tell me where, all our tax dollars are going and why it's not going to fill my pothole in front of my yard. Is there a certain response time that they're looking for something that because I know you know, for like the same thing with city lights and stuff like that, that, you know, you go online, you get your little, ticket number or whatever, you can look to see where it is. And I would think that that's something that's fairly simple. This gentleman was a little, there's ways to get, more benefit, I guess, or more, I don't know what the word is, feedback, I guess, and I don't know how to do that more than what your already system seems like it was working already, but I don't know if there's a suggestion for how long people wait before they ping people back, or I don't know what to ask. I'm kind of lost maybe, but
John, do you have any response to Chris on that, what the expectation is for replies?
So I know most of those work orders are satisfied within 3 or 4 days. But sometimes it is weather dependent. And with lights, especially Rocky Mountain Power sometimes has to be involved, and that delays the process because they have one vendor who can do the work. But if we can change the bulb, we'll do it. But if it's a power supply problem, then they have to do it.
and I think it's mostly feedback, and I've tried to encourage that with this one individual, but and I guess like city sidewalks, I've noticed that if you get on the list, then they come out and paint what they're gonna, so I've seen action, and so I trust the process. I'm just trying to get others to try to trust the process. And I guess there was one other thing that went in and out of my brain, but anyways, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. John, you see anyone online?
No hands.
You'd like to step up to the pulpit and state your name, if we're a resident of North Ogden, you can use those comments to no more than 5 minutes.
Chad Jensen, proud member of North Ogden. I just wanted to touch base on the creek on Center North. I think Tim Jones called you today about that.
Yeah, I spoke.
You guys talked about that at all today?
I spoke with Dave.
So the road's eroding about a foot right south of Clark's, your brother's driveway that's falling in the creek. I know if I don't do something this spring, I'm gonna lose my mailbox. It's falling in the creek. It's gonna erode under my culvert. So I don't know whose responsibility is that creek, who owns that creek, but I'm pretty sure it's on city property, not resident property. I just gotta know what to do with this creek. Love to have any thoughts on that. That's it.
Don, would you like to respond? We had that discussion earlier with you and Dave about that situation. Would you like to respond, please?
So it is on our master plan council to eventually pipe that. It is it's a natural flow. There's also stormwater that goes in it, and then Bonta Vista occasionally, when they have to turn out their well and their tanks, they utilize it as well to discharge water. And so it's kind of this weird trifecta, but essentially the city's in charge of keeping the road stable, and will continue to do so. But when it comes to the private improvements, because it is a natural creek, there's stuff or state law that basically says each landowner is supposed to protect their stuff. I know that Public Works is looking at how to shore it up and look at how to protect the roadside. But it is just kind of one of those natural things, watery roads. And I haven't been down there to look at it personally, see how bad it is, but I know Dave and his team will evaluate and see what things we can do to help mitigate it. But I think to put the pipe in last estimate I heard was 400 grand to pipe it, and for roughly half a mile, I think is about how long the ditch is open, the creek is open.
Where's the city?
1700 north, south side from Route
900 east.
You wanna look at
I
that?
showed John the pictures of that earlier today, and Mr. Jones sent over pictures, so that's kind of where we're at. John, I think if I heard that right, you're saying technically it's the responsibility of the property owner. I think this gentleman asked who owns the property.
Well, so when it's a natural flow like that, it's basically everyone's in charge of their own improvements. So like the mailbox is technically the property or the mailbox owner's job to keep it from erosion impacting it. Same thing with the culvert. The city doesn't put the culverts in, but we allow residents to put those in. But then the road obviously would be the city's responsibility. And so it's when it comes to stormwater, it's one of those messy areas of the law for individual property owners, because the way the courts always look at it is stormwater is a universal evil. And everyone's fighting it and doing their best, but there's no one person responsible for erosion caused by storm flows and natural flows, so.
Yeah, I know there was a comment too about the lack of ability to get sandbags. I think we have to allocate what we have. So it's not unlimited, but we would like to help. Again, because I think the property, if that were to overflow, it doesn't necessarily go out into the street, it goes probably into the property owner's front yards.
Yeah.
So you're welcome to look at it. I've been down there myself. There is some erosion of the shoulder of the road there. And so it is an issue. Okay. Anything else, John? Anybody online? Anyone here like to make a comment? All right. John, do you have any staff, you or Steve or Susan, Dave, anybody? Think Scott left?
No, it's good.
Oh, he's hiding behind Mr. Burns. I don't have the same angle as you guys there, so. Any comments, John?
Just one, I know you're gonna bring up the budget thing, Mayor, but there was a letter to the editor in the newspaper. And just for some additional details, the expired license plate was 1 day beyond the temporary registration, which was obtained 8 months after the actual vehicle registration expired. And we pulled the car originally over at 8 months old, or 8 months expired, and we weren't looking for them or anything like that. They just came in front of one of the police officers' vehicles and they noticed it was expired and the temporary was expired also. Initiated the stop and eventually called for backup because of some scenarios that occurred in that exchange. But not saying that the person got aggressive or anything. There just were some protocols that required us to call backup because of things that happened. So I think some of it's a misunderstanding and a lot of it's the frustration on the part of the individual for feeling mistreated, but our officers are following protocol. And so, it's unfortunate that it was being compared to the stuff that happened in Farmington. I think they're very, very different situations. So, anyways, just wanted to put your minds at rest if you saw that letter to the editor.
Okay. Any other comments from staff? Council, any further comments from residents that we need to address? That's what I've got to ask, please.
Just wanted to mention that the rain barrel program is now in place. So anyone that's interested in getting a rain barrel for the discounted price of $55, they can go to the city website. I believe if it's not there, it will be there shortly. And the city Facebook page, the North Ogden City One North Ogden, or the Instagram page for more information on how to order those. I believe it's going to be a limit of 1 per resident until we know what the demand is, and then possibly opened up to more if we can.
Mayor, just
Go ahead.
council, so one of my assignments is with the Youth City Council. And we had decided, meaning Gina Ruby and I had talked to them about a month ago. And we offered them an opportunity to come and sit with us actually up here on the stand on March 28th.
Oh, cool.
So that I'm hoping we talked about it again over the weekend. So be prepared for that, March 28th. We want to be able to have some authentic experiences with being up here on the.
Yep. Okay, and thank you, Councilmember Severing, for your participation. I know you were up at University of Utah State University with 12 of our folks trying to help them learn more about life. So thank you for your commitment in doing that. Anything, Councilmember Swanson?
Just a comment that I was pretty excited, Councilmember Severing, when in your report you mentioned that spring is here and Arby's was coming out. That's what I heard, was Arby's, and I was thinking, wow, what is Arby's doing? And then I was disappointed to learn that it was the RVs that are coming out. So.
Okay, Councilmember Barker, please.
Yeah, I just think we should point out that Trent got a fantastic looking mustache and he has a career as a firefighter if he'd like one.
Wow.
Yep. And one other thing, Pineview gets turned on in a month from tomorrow, just in case we need water.
Wow.
What?
April 15th.
Good.
Well, they probably will. They haven't announced it yet.
Just one thing, council, we will need to set a public hearing on the 28th of March. We have an opportunity to do some street repairs this year, and the timing is very instrumental. I think the bid came in about 35% less than was estimated because of the timing, and so we'd like to amend the budget to go ahead and get that done this year, along with, I think, amending the budget for the motion this evening. So on the 28th of March, we will be having a public hearing to address those issues. Okay, anything else? If not, I look for a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn.